about 6 years ago or something, 5 years ago, they banned the use of lead white because of the lead in it. It's absorbed through the skin, all those sorts of things. And I use a lot of lead white. It's very stringy, has a lovely quality. Rembrandt used it a lot, and you can see it in the collars and all the other stuff. It's just a lovely quality of paint. So I thought, right, I've got to start making my own. The more I looked into it, it was just fascinating about how they used to refine their own oils. Basically, flax oil is linseed. All paints, modern paints, have dryers in, secatives, which are nasty chemicals which speed up the drying. I was getting headaches every afternoon after a day in the studio. So I just thought, I've got to get rid of all of that, really. And that's what started me making the paint. So now in the studio, there's no terps, no chemicals. It's just oil and the pigment and extenders, which is basically chalk. So, clean environment. The method to refine the oil, which is the heart of the whole thing, that goes back to like 14th, 15th century, where your raw oil, which is cold pressed linseed oil, is mixed with sand, salt and hot water. Then that is spun, or you use a drill or whatever it is to mix it or shake it until it forms an emulsion. Then the sand gradually settles out, and that takes all the impurities out of the oil as it settles to the bottom. And you have to go through that process 3 times, and then you're left with a pure oil. And there's another part of the process, which is you have to then heat that oil for 2 hours to say 150 degrees. You let that cool, and then you've got your pure oil, and that's the basis of all the paint that you want to make. So to use the oil, you've got your pigments. So you take your oil, you mix it with the pigment and an extender, which is chalk, and on a glass plate and a muller, you just grind those things together until you get a lovely smooth buttery consistency, and then that's your paint basically. So it's quite time consuming, which is why most people prefer to just go to the art shop and buy a tube of paint. But that'll have dryers and all sorts of other things in. So this keeps it very simple, pure. Heating and purifying the oil increases or decreases the drying time. So you get an oil that dries in maybe 2 to 3 hours as opposed to a week. So it makes a huge difference. The whole thing of making my own paint, it just feeds through in my understanding of the whole physicality of the way I make paintings. Like, they're very textured, they're very physical objects. So I don't want them just to be like a window that you look through into this imaginary perspective. I want them to have a presence like all the other objects that might be in a room. There's a very textured edge that you can see. Nothing's covered on the paintings. So there's a process, and it all links together, and it all feeds my understanding of the way that I make paintings. Generally, I would say that a painting will start on the floor. So lying on the floor, and I use big hand sweeping brushes, stuff like that, to work the paint. I think for me, it's like I'm trying to chase something that's right at the back of my head and I don't know what it is. So you want to keep things as open and fluid as possible, and then gradually the painting will crystallise around the image. So I'm hunting it. So there's something in the back of my mind where I know what I'm trying to get to. Often there is already the seed of something there. Like I keep hundreds of sketchbooks, and I might make a tiny sketch, maybe this big, just a tiny little note, and that's enough just to jog my memory. And I'll think, yeah, there's something in there that I want to move nearer to. That's what it feels like. You want to move nearer to that thing that's in the back of your head somewhere, and there's something attracting you to it, but you don't know what it is. So I guess that's how they sort of germinate, really, the paintings. I use all kinds of things to scrape and bash and scratch into the paint. The main thing is that it works. It tends to work from very broad, loose strokes to gradually finding the image. So as the image starts to emerge, then the tools I use just become a little bit finer. But often the finest tool that I will use would be a child's glue brush. I use those all the time, so that you've got like a 1/2-inch brush and you can cut them to the shape you want. You can really stodge them around. They're not precious items. And that's one of my favourite. Often I'll get from start to finish in a painting, and that just with children's glue brushes. There's various recurring themes, I suppose, that you could say I'm a bit obsessed with. Houses appear in paintings, a lot of isolated houses, just very almost childlike little houses, but I think that represents like shelter. It's like a basic idea of a dwelling place, if you like. Landscape, I use landscape a lot in the paintings, trees, plants generally, I suppose. It probably goes back to childhood, really. When we were kids, my dad was a gardener, and we lived in the gatehouse of a huge estate in Sussex, and the owner was very rarely there, always abroad. So as kids, we had the run of the whole estate. So a fantastic sense of sort of freedom and just being around nature, really. The things that are locked in childhood, in those early years, are just very important, and they just seem to resonate through the rest of your life, really. Those early experiences when you're really open, and life can be a process of gradually closing down, and you've got to work to keep it going the other way, I think. For me, every painting is like a puzzle. You're trying to solve a puzzle. You're not trying to get to the thing you're representing, you're trying to solve the puzzle on the canvas. So it's like people say, how do you know when a painting's finished? And to be honest, I sort of don't. It's a bit like looking through one of those kaleidoscopes where you're turning the wheel and then you get to something that you really like. It all just seems to fall into place. That's a point where you could stop a painting. Then you could tweak something, and you find the whole thing changes, and you have to change the whole painting to try and find that harmony and balance again. So it's all puzzle solving, really, the process of making a painting. In my mind, my paintings are all very much based in the real world, even though they've been described as fantastical, otherworldly. I've always tried to extract something from the ordinary, everyday things that you might see or do. I think what I'm trying to get closer to is maybe your subconscious life, and it's like peeling back onion layers. And I think that there's a deeper heart to things somehow, and that's what I want to get a little resonance of, that deeper heart, which is not about how things appear. It's about some other kind of poetry. When I'm painting, all the other things in my life seem to have more light and point to them. which is interesting. I haven't really worked that one out myself. Yeah.